Every leader is a risk manager. And you know why? Because the world is full of challenges and opportunities. And when you know how to identify, assess, build, and learn from those challenges and opportunities, you and the entire world around you will be better off.
Welcome to Women Leaders on the Move, a Her C-Suite radio podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Benamou, and every week I bring you inspirational stories and ideas to help you with the arc of your career. I'm also the founder of Her C-Suite, a powerful network community of ambitious women on the move. And we have created a special circle just for you, our listener. Yes, you can now network with other listeners, get access to me personally, come to office hours, and meet the guests from this show. I hope you'll check it all out at hercsuite.com. I am really excited to introduce you to my guest today, Princess Castleberry. I met her in one of the most unusual places during a live podcast that I go to every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. Central called Sales Logic Podcast. I met her by commenting back and forth, and I was really inspired by her. We became fast friends, and here we are today. I know you're going to get a lot out of this discussion. Princess Castleberry is a global speaker with more than 2 decades of experience in Fortune 500 enterprise risk management, wellness, and learning design. She creates learning experiences that integrate wellness and risk strategies to overcome the challenges that prevent leaders, organizations, and bottom lines from growing. She's been featured at a TEDx Detroit event, as well as in Fast Company magazine and other publications. You are going to love this conversation. So let's get started with Princess now. Princess, I'm so thrilled to welcome you to Women Leaders on the Move today. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Thanks for having me.
I have really enjoyed our brief time. We've gotten to know each other a little bit, but for our audience who hasn't had the chance to know a little bit about you, I would love for you to walk us through the arc of your career because it's so interesting.
Thank you so much. So, as you know, I am a global speaker. I help leaders think like risk managers to better protect their people, purpose, and profits. I also am the CEO of Castleberry Global. We are an experiential learning company, and we teach according to a model that I created called Every Leader is a Risk Manager. So it's a comprehensive skills model to help leaders really navigate through these very well-being and wellness conscious times that we're in, but still keeping their own well-being, the well-being of the business, and risk management at the center of their operations. It's a real unique blend of my background and all the things that I love. A bit self-serving there.
Well, no, I think it's really great that you have found this niche that you also love. I mean, knowing what we like to do is half the thing that we should be doing, and the other half is serving. I think you and I share that. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about that risk management piece, because I think for a lot of our listeners, they might be thinking like big companies, or what does that mean? Or is it like financials? So let's just start with that. What does risk management mean in different scenarios?
Yes, perfect question. So I'll take it a step back a bit and say, what is a risk, right? A risk is the possibility of harm or loss to something of value. And when you think about that as a broad stroke, everything, almost anything that you touch, see, or do can be a risk. It's a risk driving every day. We take risk with the things that we eat. We take risk in the relationships that we form. When we have all of our money tied to an electronic means that could be disrupted by technology failures. Those are all risks. It's all around us. But when you think about it very simply, everything that you find value in is potentially at risk. So risk management is just finding creative ways and solutions to protect the things that matter. That's how I like to explain it. Sometimes when people hear risk, they think that all we do is predict doom and gloom scenarios. What's all the bad things that could happen? What are all the challenges? And that can lead to, as you can, might imagine, a depressing kind of life. But I like to look at risk a different way, because the opposite side of that coin, Natalie, is opportunity. If there are things that cause us challenge and potential harm, right on the other side of that, there's a whole host of things that we can avail ourselves to if we're prepared to take advantage of tremendous opportunities for growth, for relationships, for leverage, to build things that don't exist yet in the world. So we're constantly surrounded by both. That's how every level of self works at an individual level, for your family, for your work, right? Your business, your community, and the world at large.
It is so important. And I think it's easy to put off the things that we might be fearful of. So if we think risk is going to do harm, it's this fight or flight kind of thing where you're just like, I'm just going to walk. I don't want to even look at that today. I'm just going to leave it over here.
Yeah. People don't like to address it. People
Nobody
don't like
likes to address it, right?
Yeah, people don't
Exactly.
like to address that stuff.
Yeah.
But if you reposition it and say, well, if you address those things, especially the things that are obvious, if you can address those things or take time to really think through the things that may not be so obvious on the surface, but that might cause you to have to step back and see trends emerging, or be listening very well, or talking to other people to figure out what's going on. Pursuing your challenges and some of the obstacles can be very helpful too. But just notice everything that I just mentioned about how you find the bad stuff actually promotes very healthy behaviors in our society, looking for challenges with the eye of and the mindset of solving them, solving problems, including people, having to talk to others, thinking critically. These are all the things when you look at society and business that leaders are saying are sorely lacking in the workforce and sorely lacking in how they see our young people being brought up. But if you have a mindset of a risk manager, you have to do those things. And without rooting out challenges, you just can't find great opportunities. So they go hand in hand to me.
They do. And so a lot of our listeners, they're leaders, as you know, they're women in organizations, and they could be on boards. And boards have a
Yeah,
really interesting responsibility to look at risk. What are some of
absolutely.
those things that you've seen that are easy to maybe have too much faith in what you're being told? Because I hear that sometimes, and we study that in real world case studies where the board just was like, oh, this M&A, this looks like a good deal. We're just going to go forward, instead of taking that lens and saying, well, what is the risk? What are those things? So what are some things that as a board they should be thinking about when they're looking at opportunities?
Let's take on a board that is responsible for governance, that is involved in meeting with the CEO and executive teams or executive committees of companies and coming in looking for that guidance. Well, the whole purpose of having a board is that you have somebody that is positioned out in another part of the world who can give great advice, right? Give that guidance and provide a structure for due diligence, things like that. And so I think that board members should be looking for data, looking beyond the anecdote, looking beyond the surface. And that's why they're in place in the first place. They bring a certain skill set and knowledge to the table, hopefully, that an organization needs to make very solid decisions or get their ideas, the executive team's ideas, green lighted so that they can go forward comfortably. But what you're looking from a board is just to get that insight and that guidance on the plans to make sure things don't get derailed, to make sure you don't have so much tunnel vision in the organization that you're overlooking, some major trends happening in the world, or you're overlooking some of the intersections that happen with in those other areas and realms that the board members have expertise. So I just think that board members are constantly thinking like risk managers, like that. Those are like my favorite people because they're constantly poking holes and challenging the ideas. And good boards don't just sit there and take information at the surface level. They know how to ask good questions. One of my favorite characteristics about being a risk manager is that I have an insatiable curiosity about things. And I think good board members have insatiable curiosity where they know how to dig, they know where to pry, and they don't do it just for the sake of, they do it to get real insight so that they can provide insight. And that's what women should be doing.
And women that are in an organization and they might be presenting an idea and they're aligning it to the business. So they've got that checked off and they're ready. But I think that a lot of times people forget about the risk. Sometimes it's what happens if we don't do it. right? You have an idea and you've got this budget, you're asking for a budget approval, and then what happens if we don't do it, right? But what are some other things that they can be thinking about to be ready for when they get asked questions? Because I think that's part of it, is just being prepared and thinking through, I want to get this initiative to go through, and I might receive it. There might be some barriers that I don't even know about. What can someone do to prepare, do you think, for that?
I think to prepare, it's the same approach that I use even with my own well-being. It's the same approach. I deploy the risk management process, and I boiled it down to a simpler form. You're going to see the risk management process in a lot of different iterations, but I start with identify. What am I talking about? Like what challenge or what idea or opportunity is in front of us? And I get a really firm statement, a really concise, firm statement on exactly what I'm trying to pursue or prevent, right? In some cases. But what am I trying to pursue? What are the solutions? And I give a few alternate solutions. But the next step in the risk management process is that you assess. You have to assess your position. Real simple. What is current state? Where are we now? What are we in position to take advantage of? And if we move, timing is always part of it, right? If we act now, we can gain X, Y, or Z. If we wait, we might still have some gains, but it'll be diminished. If we don't do it, we're in trouble. That's usually the type of analysis that people go through. And analysis has to do with understanding depending on the scenario, what's going to happen, what the impact is going to be, what the severity is, and what's the likelihood of something happening within a specific time period. The next stage of that really simple process, identify, assess, I say build. And build is just my way of saying solve, right? Most models will say solve, come up with some solution. But I like to use the word build because sometimes solutions are like Lego blocks. They're laying right there. You just need to fit the right pieces together. You need to get the right people, technology, tools, frameworks to the table and put it together, and you can build it. And sometimes you have to do something that's never been done before. The pieces aren't there. Now you have to ideate and you have to create and go into your whole creative bag. And so I love to use the word build because solving makes it seem like there's some answer just laying there. Yeah, that's not always the case. And the last part of the model that I use is that you just simply learn. And learning means that you have to trust what you've put in place. You have to trust the people and the resources you've consulted, and you put the plan in motion. You have to take action, activate it, fund it, whatever that means in your organization. And then you sit back and you watch it. You have to monitor it and learn and have a system in place where you're capturing learnings, not just from your perspective, but for the perspectives of people, especially those who are most directly affected by either the challenge or the opportunity. I mean, I know I just laid that out there, but in my mind, the way this mind works, you can use that in corporations, you use that at the community level, you use it for your family, you use it for how you govern and manage yourself.
Yeah, every level, right? Because what we're talking about, although we're talking more on the corporate level, if we take it down to a smaller business or an entrepreneur, which we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are our listeners too. Yes, you and I also, we're entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's where I am. That's where I live these days.
Sometimes, and I'll just say, like, I hear this from entrepreneurs and I experience this myself. You're so in the thick of your business that risk is, again, it's that thing that you're like, I know, I know, I know, but really you have to pay attention to the signs. What are some signs for entrepreneurs that they should be wary of, or acknowledging that this is something they should be proactively looking out forward?
Well, that's a brilliant question. The first thing I want to say is I'm a former corporate citizen, right? So I'm out here full time in the land, the risky land of entrepreneurship. And the first thing that we have to realize that makes us so different from the Fortune 500s and 1000s that we come from is that they have margins and they have cushion and they have other levers that they can pull. A lot of times, especially when you're in your first 5 years, like I'm about to hit that 5-year mark in my business. And I'll tell you, 2.5 years into my business, I completely pivoted and shifted the focus of my business. So really, my business now feels 2.5 years old. It's a toddler, and it's talking back and falling down and bumping its head and all that stuff. And so risk is key. Risk is key, understanding these processes, because we don't have a lot of margin for error like a big company does. We're navigating little tiny Titanics.
Yes.
These are like tiny Titanic sometimes, because sometimes there's this thought that small businesses, because we're small, oh, we're so nimble and we can change. You might be nimble in terms of being autocratic. It's just you as a solopreneur, so you can change your mind and pivot. But guess what? You know what's not nimble? Maybe your bank account isn't nimble. Maybe your funding sources are not nimble. Maybe your tech systems, your partnerships, your strategic relationships. If you don't have all that built out as a small entrepreneur, you might not be all that nimble. You might be a
Mhm.
tiny Titanic ready to run into an iceberg. So that's why risk management is key. I've gone through some changes. Like, we can talk about some stories. I remember, I'll tell you this, and I don't know if I've ever said this publicly. When I started my business in late 2019, so what a time to start a business, what a time to leave your, six-figure corporate job, and start off on your own without a real solid target or marketing strategy or anything. You're just out there with the wing and a prayer. The pandemic started, and I had to pivot very quickly because it was like pivot or die. The Titanic, it was sinking, my little boat. And I opened up my commercial checking account because I was, separating my personal spending and my business spending like you're supposed to. And that the bank at the time had a $2,500 minimum. Like a lot of commercial accounts have that minimum. And I had made myself and my husband a promise that I was not going to dip into our personal savings to fund the business. Wrong. But I had that. That was my agreement with him. That was my agreement with myself. And I was like, I can do this without touching anything else, and it's going to be perfect. Guess what? That account had to close for insufficient funds. I couldn't build up anything fast enough when I started, and I was struggling. Now, overall, I wasn't struggling because I had other money, but it broke the agreement that I had, that I wasn't going to, aside from that initial $2,500, I wasn't going to put anything else in unless it was a contract. And I doubled down on that flawed thinking, and that account couldn't stay open because as I started to have to invest a little bit in marketing and do some printouts here and there, and then I was thinking about, oh, am I going to ever eat? Am I going to have any other expenses? How do I court a client with nothing? Very fast, that money, that initial seed money ran out, and my account was on the verge of going into the negative. I wasn't going to let that happen, so I had to close it. And I had to close it until I sat down and came up with an actual plan. And I did that. I mean, obviously, I've had a lot of success since then. Those are the early days. But that's why risk management is important. Risk management is forethought, is proactive. You can't control everything. So there will be things in life and business that put you in a reactive stance, like a damn pandemic, but or in, smaller iterations of that. But the reality is risk management is business. Risk management is planning. There is no business without risk management. There just isn't.
Right. First of all, congratulations on 5 years. I think that's a tremendous milestone. I too started in the pandemic in 2020, at the end of 2020. I talk about this a lot on the show that I was the conductor on the Titanic. That's why I was smiling when you were saying this,
Oh,
which people aren't
really?
seeing us when we're talking, but I was in trade shows and I can remember the day when the whole industry fell out. I was leading a team. We had a huge facility where people were, and everything stopped. Everything ended. That was it. And I led my team through that really tough summer. And like we reinvented, and I helped my company pivot to be digital. And that's how I decided, like, well, what is this digital stuff? I should learn it. So I doubled down and learned all the things.
Yeah.
But the clients could never know the peril that was going on in the background, because we were still billing clients and doing stuff for them, but the employees weren't whole. And so that was really the thing that made me decide, like, this isn't aligned with me. But the Titanic, I was the conductor. I was the conductor on that ship. And I was like, everything is fine. Everything is fine. We're all good. Staying positive for the clients. Everything is good. In the background, they're all like, the thing is slight lopsided and all the things. So I would say that as entrepreneurs, one of the most important things is being around people like yourself that can, like, understand the path and
That's
help
right.
us imagine and see the icebergs that are hidden below the surface that we might not know because we're new. And had someone gone before you and said, you know what, Princess, let me just tell you about my story, like we're doing today. And what you're saying is going to help a new entrepreneur think about, hey, you know what? Not all banks make you have that high balance. There's some that don't require that. So look at all the banks. So it's like,
Right,
that's like
exactly.
some stuff that you just don't, because you go to your bank and you're like, oh, I'm gonna open my bank. I mean, I can relate.
How about if you're gonna charter a ship, how about charting out the course first?
Right. You're
That's
like,
really
okay,
good.
I can relate on so many levels and pivoting. And I'm 3 years in and we're about to do this big, a little bit of a shift, but in a really positive way. I'm super
Yeah.
excited. By the time this comes out, that will already have happened. And so what are you most excited about in the fall? I know you're speaking at a lot of conferences and you're doing so many things. What has you most excited about the end of the year or going into the fall and the things that you're doing?
Yeah, I just have some great things this fall working with companies like Big B Coffee with their Big B Nation Summit, working with women in hospitality leadership that are part of the Michigan Restaurant and Hospitality Association. Just working with some incredible organizations and hitting all those stages. That's what I look forward to. I have a few great conferences coming up where I'm speaking and some where I'm just a guest. That's the best part, honestly, learning about this glorious, glorious industry of professional speaking, getting my messages out there. I am writing my first book.
Yay. Tell me about that.
No title just yet, but the framework that I'm referencing in the book is a framework that I teach from and speak from today, and it's called Every Leader is a Risk Manager. Shocker. And the framework it's really more than a framework. It's a model for how to work and live, right? It's just ways of living and working to centralize and protect and eventually leverage your well-being. And so after, all my years, I spent more than 22 years in corporate America in enterprise risk management. And I worked in a lot of different capacities. I've worked on global insurance programs, business continuity and disaster response planning, contract negotiations, employment and legislative compliance, cybersecurity, all these areas of risk that are really prominent and people see these things in the headlines. But what I was always interested in when I was working on those programs were the people, because whether or not a company was going to be compliant, whether we were going to be profitable and live out the purpose of the organization, it always comes down to the people and how they behave, how they think, if they're well, if they're getting along with each other, if they have a sense of belonging. And so I created this model that really explains ways to maximize your living and you're working in these key areas. And I tie that into and the behaviors that are associated with it. I tie that into our ability to be effective risk managers. The book is really written from a business standpoint, but it's applicable to every level of self. That's my approach to it. And I started drilling it down and thinking more and more like a risk manager in my everyday life. And I'll tell you, thinking the way that I have has allowed me to pivot, has allowed me to identify tremendous opportunities and always be on the edge of winning things and building things and going from corporate into the TEDx stage. And people ask me all the time, how did you do it? How did you do it? How did you do it? It's the way that I think. It's the way that I think. And I got that from the way that I worked. And now I'm sharing it with people.
I can't wait to share all the links on your TEDx talk and all the things that you're doing. And also, I have to give a shout out for how we originally met, which is so unconventional. And I love it because I go to it every Saturday. So if people ever follow me, they see. But every Saturday morning, and you're on the East Coast, I'm Central, so 7 a.m. my time. I go to this live podcast with Meredith Elliott Powell and Mark Hunter.
Yes.
And you were there and we were commenting, and I was like, who's this? I really like what she's saying. And so that's how we connected. And so I really applaud all the things that you're doing. And I love that that's how we met. If people want to learn more about you and they don't see you on Saturday mornings like I get to sometimes, where should they go to learn more about you?
Yeah, you can definitely find me at www.princesscastleberry.com. That is my real name, by the way. We didn't talk about that. And you can always find me on LinkedIn. I am a LinkedIn fanatic. And I think still to this day, still running, I am the only Princess Castleberry in all of LinkedIn land. So find me in those two places. If you're on Instagram, you can find me at Princess Castleberry Speaks.
So good. I'm going to have all of those links. And I'm so glad we had a chance to talk today. I learned so much. I could keep talking. We'll have to have a part two, maybe later after the
Yeah.
fall. We'll have a part two because I love all the things you're saying. So thank you for being here today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for reaching out. I love that.
Thank you for spending your time with us today. I hope that you feel as excited and energized as I do. I enjoyed so much the opportunity to have this conversation with Princess. And if you did and you're in our community, make sure that you post a comment and let me know what part of the interview you liked. I also record special podcasts just for our members in our Her C-Suite platform that are part of Leaders on the Move. Check it all out at hercsuite.com. I would be so honored if you found this episode helpful to rate and review it on your favorite podcast app. It's how people find us. And as always, keep shining your light bright. The world needs you.